Okay, this is exponents. And let's just do a little talk about exponents. So, let's say I have 2, and then you see that little 5 up there, okay? This is the notation. We call this part the base, and we call this part the exponent, okay? And what 2 with a 5 up there is called 2 to the 5th power. And that implies that we multiply 2 by itself 5 times. So we'll do that 5 times. So what do? We get 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 equals 32. Okay? Now you can also take a negative number and do the same thing. Okay? And in that case, it would be negative 2 okay, but watch this. See, if now let's watch this. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, right? Times negative 2 is negative 8. Times negative 2 is positive 16. Times negative 2 equals negative 32. So that equals negative 32. Okay? Now, if I take this and I raise it to the 4th power, watch what happens. I go negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, times negative 2 is negative 8, times negative 2 is positive 16. Okay? So, if you have an odd number raised to an even exponent, the answer is going to come back even, or positive. And if you have a negative number raised to an odd exponent, the answer is going to come back odd. Okay? So, maybe you might want to write that down, okay? And just like what I do a lot of times when I learn stuff is I just write it down, and then I just use a little sheet and I do my homework with the little sheet and I just look at it. And eventually, by the time I've done 10 or so problems, it's starting to kind of stick in my head. So that's kind of how those go. The thing that you can get confused about is let me take negative 2. If I write it like this, that implies a completely different operation. That implies that negative 2, or the negative sign, be applied to 2 to the 5th power. So what we'd do right there is we'd have and this is 32, so we still have negative 32. But if we take this and apply it to an even power, well, just watch what happens. Oops. Well, this right here, that is just going to end up being negative 16. Okay, normally if we just multiplied 4 negative 2's by themselves, we get a positive 16 like we did up here. But basically this negative sign basically says do this part and then tack the negative sign on when you're done. And just be careful you don't accidentally put one in there like I did. So, that's kind of how that goes. Alright. Now, they don't just apply to just regular numbers. Sometimes you can see a fraction raised to a power. Okay? So you might see 1/2, and usually they put it in parentheses, and you might see this raised to the 3rd power. Okay, so this would be 1/2 raised to the 3rd power. Okay, and it's just the same idea. It means we're going to take 1/2 and we're going to multiply it by itself 3 times. Okay? And when you do multiplication, remember, you don't need to get common denominators. Multiplication and division are the easy ones to do, okay? So all we have to do is just multiply straight through, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take I'm going to take my numerator, I'm just going to multiply them straight through. Okay? So 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1, right? Okay? 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So we end up with 1/8. Okay? Now here's another thing that can happen. You might have 1/2 and plus 1. Then you might see that raised to a power. Okay, you might see something like this. Remember from our algebra rules that the parentheses, anything that we're able to take care of inside of the parentheses is going to be, that's going to be the first step we take. Okay, so in this first step I take, I find that I'm able to do some operations inside the parenthesis. Most notably getting a common denominator. Okay, so I'm just, basically all I did is I just multiplied, you know, 1 is really just 1 over 1. And I need a 2 down there. And I can do that as long as I put a 2 by, if I multiply, I can do whatever I want to the top of the fraction as long as I do it to the bottom. So we end up pretty good right there. So I end up with 1/2 plus 2 over 2 raised to the 4th power, just like that. Okay? Well, now I can just add, when you add fractions, remember that you just add the numerator, which is 3, and you leave the denominator alone. Okay, you don't do anything to that. Okay? Well, then we end up with 3 to the 4th, 3 halves, all to the 4th power. Okay? So let's just go ahead and write that out. Okay? The way I like to do these sometimes is I like to look at this and I say 9, then I look at this group of numbers and it's 9, then I know 9 times 9 is 81. Okay? And then 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So that's the answer to this problem right here. Okay? Not bad, right? Not bad. Let's do another one with a fraction like that in there. So let's go 3/4 plus 2/5 and raise that to the 2nd power. Okay? So that means we're going to have 3/4 times, that's basically what this transfers to, right? We're going to take this and multiply it by itself 2 times. Okay, but before we do that, we want to get a common denominator. So let's just work on the inside, just for the moment. And it looks like my common denominator is going to be 20. Okay, so I'm going to take this, multiply it by 4. I'm going to take this, multiply it by 5. And I end up with 15/20 plus 8/20. Okay? And that, oops, 20ths, I'm sorry. Remember, we just leave the denominator alone. We add the top, and we get 23/20. Okay? Now let's take that, and we'll plug it right back into our guy right there. Okay? So we're going to have 23/20. And we're going to square that. Okay, so it's 20/20, 23/20. You can use your calculator if you want. I know this is going to be 4, and there'll be 2 zeros on the end of it. 23 times 23, let's see, that's just going to be, what is that, 409? Let me see that, if I did my math correctly. No, it's 529. Oops, I didn't do it correctly at all. So it's 529, 400. And there's nothing wrong with using your calculator on these bigger ones. So that is just normal exponents for you. We might throw some algebra in there on the next video, okay? See you in the next one.